Karen told me to move. I'm in labor and a rescue paramedic. The pager clipped to my belt vibrated with that insistent, urgent buzz that always cut through the mundane and snapped me into high alert. Even though I was off duty, technically enjoying a rare Saturday morning sleep-in at my own place within the meticulously manicured confines of the Willow Creek Estates, the dispatcher's clipped voice crackling through the small speaker sent a familiar surge of adrenaline through me. Medic 1, respond to a 911 call at 42 Sycamore Lane. Unresponsive individual, possible cardiac event. My own address was 18 Sycamore Lane, just a few blocks away. My heart sank. A cardiac event in our usually quiet, if somewhat opinionated little enclave. I was off shift, no uniform, just an old t-shirt and sweatpants, but every second counted. Training kicked in instantly. I grabbed my go bag, the one I kept stocked for just such off-duty emergencies, snagged my keys and bolted out the door, my mind already racing through protocols and potential interventions. Willow Creek Estates, a place where the lawns were always emerald green, the mailboxes uniformly black, and the biggest neighborhood drama usually revolved around whose azaleas were encroaching on whose perfectly defined property line. It was the kind of place where rules were not just guidelines. They were gospel, meticulously enforced by the Homeowners Association, and the unofficial enforcer-in-chief was a woman named Karen. Ah, Karen. Even the mere mention of her name could elicit a collective groan from most of the residents. Karen Henderson, a woman whose dedication to the HOA bylaws bordered on religious zealotry. Her days seemed to be filled with patrolling the neighborhood, her eagle eyes scanning for any infraction, no matter how minor. A misplaced garbage can? An unapproved holiday decoration a day too early? A car parked even slightly over the designated line? Karen was on it, phone in hand, ready to document and report. My own interactions with Karen had been limited, thankfully. As a rescue paramedic, my life often spilled outside the neat little boxes of HOA regulations. The occasional late-night arrival home in my marked ambulance, sometimes parked momentarily in a less-than-ideal spot while unloading equipment, had earned me a few of her patented disapproving stares. I'd learned to offer a polite but firm explanation. Emergency services, ma'am, which usually, but not always, quelled her immediate objections. But today was different. Today, the emergency was within our community, and today, something else was different with me. A dull ache had started in my lower back a few hours earlier, something I'd initially dismissed as muscle strain from a particularly grueling shift the day before. But as I'd been jolted awake by the pager, the ache had intensified, radiating around my abdomen in a rhythmic tightening. I'd recognized the sensation instantly, the knowledge hitting me with a mixture of shock and a wry sense of timing. Labor. My water hadn't broken and the contractions were still relatively mild, but there was no mistaking the signs. My due date was still a week away, but apparently my little one had other plans. Now, as I raced down Sycamore Lane in my personal SUV, blue lights flashing on the dashboard, the contractions were coming more frequently, each one a sharp reminder of the life-altering event unfolding within me. I gripped the steering wheel, trying to focus on the address, on the potential patient, on staying calm. My paramedic training was battling with the primal instincts of an impending birth. I pulled up to 42 Sycamore Lane, a well-maintained two-story house with perfectly trimmed hedges and a pristine lawn. The kind of house Karen would undoubtedly approve of. An older woman, her face etched with worry, was standing on the porch, waving frantically. "They're inside. My husband, he just collapsed," she cried, her voice trembling. I grabbed my go bag from the back seat, the weight of the oxygen tank and medical supplies feeling heavier than usual with the tightening in my abdomen. "I'm a paramedic," I said, flashing my ID badge as I hurried towards the house. "Let me see what's going on." Inside, a man lay on the living room floor, pale and still. His breathing was shallow and erratic. The scene was classic cardiac arrest. Time was critical. "Call 911 again," I instructed the distraught wife. "Tell them a paramedic is on scene and confirm ETA for the ambulance." Even as I spoke, I was already assessing the patient, checking for a pulse, preparing to administer aid. This was it. My training, my instincts took over. The labor pains receded into the background, a dull thrum beneath the urgency of the moment. I was a paramedic first. Everything else could wait. I was in the process of setting up oxygen and preparing to check his vital signs when I heard it. That unmistakable high-pitched tone of indignation that could only belong to one person in Willow Creek Estates. Excuse me, excuse me, what is going on here? This vehicle is completely blocking the cul-de-sac. Some of us need to get through. My head snapped up, my focus momentarily diverted from the patient. Standing in the doorway, arms crossed and face contorted in her signature expression of outrage, was Karen Henderson. Her eyes were fixed not on the unconscious man on the floor, nor on his distraught wife, but on my personal SUV, parked haphazardly in the cul-de-sac in front of the house. The audacity of it stole my breath for a moment, a sharper pang than any contraction I'd felt so far. Here was a man possibly fighting for his life, his wife beside herself with worry, and Karen's primary concern was a perceived parking violation. "Ma'am," I said, trying to keep my voice calm despite the rising tide of disbelief and the insistent tightening in my abdomen. "This is an emergency. Someone inside is very sick." Karen's expression didn't soften in the slightest. "Emergency or not, you can't just block the entire street. There are rules in this community. People have places to be." "Aha." She gestured dramatically towards my SUV. "That vehicle needs to be moved, and it needs to be moved now." The sheer, breathtaking self-absorption of the woman was staggering. My labor pains intensified, a sharp, undeniable clench that made me gasp. I gripped the back of a nearby armchair for support, trying to maintain my professional composure while my body was clearly telling me it was time. This was going to be a long morning. The sheer audacity of Karen's demand momentarily stole the air from my lungs, a sharper intake than the one I instinctively drew against the tightening vice of another contraction. My body was unequivocally telling me that my focus should be on the monumental event unfolding within me. Yet here I was, a rescue paramedic on scene at a potential cardiac arrest, being harangued about parking by the neighborhood's self-appointed guardian of suburban order. "Ma'am," I repeated, trying to inject a note of urgency into my voice while simultaneously managing the growing intensity of my labor pains. "With all due respect, a man inside this house may be dying. My vehicle is positioned to allow for quick access and egress. Parking regulations are the least of our concerns right now." Karen's face, however, remained a mask of unwavering indignation. Her eyes flicked dismissively towards the distressed wife kneeling beside her unconscious husband, then back to my SUV, as if the improperly parked vehicle posed a greater threat to the community than a potential fatality. "That's no excuse for blocking the entire cul-de-sac. What if emergency services needed to get through?" The irony of her statement hung heavy in the air, thick and suffocating. Another contraction gripped me, stronger this time, a searing band of pressure around my abdomen. I had to consciously focus on my breathing, the Lamaze techniques I'd half-heartedly practiced in my third trimester suddenly feeling woefully inadequate. I leaned heavily against the armchair, trying to appear composed while waves of discomfort washed over me. "Ma'am," I said, my voice tight with a combination of pain and exasperation, "I am emergency services. I am a paramedic, and I am currently trying to stabilize a patient experiencing a possible cardiac event. My priority is saving his life, not adhering to your parking preferences." I gestured to the ID badge still clipped to my t-shirt. Karen's gaze finally flickered down to my badge, her expression shifting for the first time from pure outrage to a flicker of something. Not empathy, not understanding, but perhaps a momentary pause in her self-absorbed crusade. It lasted all of 2 seconds. "Well, you should have parked properly," she snapped, her voice regaining its accusatory edge. "Just because you're whatever you are doesn't give you the right to disregard community rules. This is a private street." The sheer, unadulterated entitlement of this woman was staggering. My disbelief warred with a rising tide of anger, fueled by the pain and the absurdity of the situation. My professional training screamed at me to remain calm and focused on the patient, but the primal urge to tell Karen exactly where she could park her opinions was a powerful one. "Ma'am," I said, taking a deep, steadying breath, "my name is Alex. I live at 18 Sycamore Lane. I am your neighbor, and right now, I am the only medical help this man has until the ambulance arrives. Please, I need you to stand aside and let me do my job." Karen remained rooted in the doorway, her arms still crossed, her expression a study in stubborn disapproval. "Well, Alex from down the street, you need to be more considerate. This is a disruption to the entire neighborhood. People are trying to go about their Saturday mornings." Another contraction hit, harder and faster this time, stealing my breath and forcing a groan past my lips. The distraught wife, witnessing my obvious discomfort, looked from me to Karen with a mixture of confusion and dawning concern. Are you all right?" she asked me, her voice filled with worry. "I'm fine," I managed to gasp out, clutching my abdomen. "Just a bit under the weather." I tried to downplay my situation, not wanting to add to the existing emergency. Karen, however, seemed to seize upon my visible discomfort as further evidence of my general incompetence. "See, you're clearly not well. Maybe you shouldn't even be here. You're probably making things worse." That was it. The dam of my professional restraint finally cracked. "Ma'am Washam," I said, my voice low and tight with a potent cocktail of pain, anger, and disbelief. "I am in labor. My contractions are 3 minutes apart, and despite that I am here, trying to save your neighbor's life. Now for the love of all that is holy, please move out of my way and let me focus on the emergency at hand." The words hung in the air, the bluntness of my revelation finally piercing through Karen's self-absorbed fog. Her mouth dropped open slightly, her eyes widening behind her oversized sunglasses. For the first time since I'd arrived, a flicker of something akin to understanding, or perhaps just sheer shock, registered on her face. The distraught wife gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "Oh my God, you're having a baby?" I nodded, my face pale and slick with sweat. Another contraction ripped through me, doubling me over for a moment. "Yes, now please. The patient." Karen remained frozen in the doorway for another agonizing second, her mind seemingly struggling to process the conflicting realities of the situation. The improperly parked SUV, the sick neighbor, and the clearly laboring paramedic trying to help. The cognitive dissonance seemed to overload her circuits. Then finally, slowly, she stepped aside, her expression a bizarre mixture of disbelief, dawning horror, and perhaps, just perhaps, a sliver of shame. The yappy dog in her carrier let out a series of confused yelps, as if sensing the shift in the atmosphere. I straightened up, wincing against the receding wave of pain, and turned my attention back to the unconscious man. Time was still critical. I continued my assessment, my training overriding the increasingly insistent demands of my own body. The ambulance sirens wailed in the distance, growing steadily louder. Help was on its way. But the precious minutes that had been wasted dealing with Karen's self-absorbed demands felt like an eternity. The conflict had been joined, not just between a paramedic in labor and a life-threatening emergency, but between the selfless dedication of a first responder and the staggering entitlement of a HOA Karen, oblivious to everything beyond her own narrow worldview. The irony of the situation was a bitter pill to swallow, each contraction a painful reminder of the absurdity of it all. The wail of the approaching ambulance sirens grew louder, a beacon of hope cutting through the surreal absurdity of the situation. I focused on the unconscious man, Mr. Henderson, no relation to the Karen of previous parts, thankfully, though the irony wasn't lost on my increasingly addled brain. His breathing remained shallow and erratic, his pulse weak. Every second counted, and the minutes wasted dealing with Karen's self-absorbed tirade felt like a lifetime in emergency medicine. The ambulance screeched to a halt in front of the house, the flashing lights casting strobing patterns across the pristine lawn. Two uniformed paramedics, a man and a woman, rushed out, their faces etched with professional urgency. "Medic 1 on scene," I reported quickly, giving them a concise rundown of the situation and the patient's vitals. They immediately took over, their practiced movements a well-oiled machine of emergency response. As they worked to stabilize Mr. Henderson and prepare him for transport, I finally allowed myself a moment to fully acknowledge the relentless demands of my own body. Another contraction hit, this one far more intense, a searing, all-encompassing pain that made me double over, gasping for breath. The world swam for a moment, the bright sunlight outside the open doorway seeming to pulse with the rhythm of my labor. The female paramedic, noticing my distress, paused her work for a fraction of a second, her brow furrowed with concern. "Are you all right, ma'am?" "I'm in labor," I managed to croak out, clutching my abdomen. The words hung in the air, drawing a stunned silence from the emergency personnel. Karen, who had been standing awkwardly in the doorway, watching the flurry of medical activity with a bizarre mixture of morbid curiosity and lingering disbelief, finally seemed to grasp the full weight of the situation. Her face, previously a mask of indignant outrage, now paled considerably behind her oversized sunglasses. Her mouth opened and closed silently, as if she were trying to form words but couldn't quite manage. The male paramedic, a burly man with a reassuringly calm demeanor, looked from me to his partner, then back to me with a mixture of shock and professional concern. You're the reporting party?" I nodded weakly, another contraction building in intensity. "Off duty. Live nearby." The realization seemed to ripple through the small group. The woman who had been first on scene, the one who had initiated care for their patient, was actively in labor. The irony was almost comical, if the pain weren't so damn real. As the paramedics carefully transferred Mr. Henderson onto a stretcher and prepared to move him to the ambulance, the distraught wife turned to me, her eyes filled with a mixture of gratitude and alarm. "Oh my God, you helped my husband while you're having a baby?" I managed a weak smile. "That's what we do." It was at this precise moment, amidst the flashing lights and the urgent murmur of medical personnel, that the full weight of the situation seemed to finally crash down upon Karen Henderson. As the paramedics wheeled the stretcher past her, her gaze fell upon Mr. Henderson's pale, still face. A choked gasp escaped her lips. "Harold," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the beeping of the medical equipment. The distraught wife turned, her eyes red and swollen with tears. "Karen, what are you doing here?" The color completely drained from Karen's face. Her carefully constructed facade of suburban entitlement crumbled, replaced by a look of utter shock and dawning horror. "Harold, is that Harold Henderson?" she stammered, her voice trembling. The distraught wife nodded, tears streaming down her face. "Yes. He collapsed just a few minutes ago." The pieces clicked into place for Karen with the force of a defibrillator shock. The improperly parked SUV belonged to the paramedic she had so rudely accosted. The disruption to the neighborhood was a life-saving emergency involving her own husband. And the woman she had so callously demanded move, her vehicle was not just a neighbor, not just whatever she was, but a dedicated rescue paramedic in active labor, who had been the first and only medical help for her dying husband. The blood drained from Karen's face, leaving it ashen. Her oversized sunglasses seemed to magnify the sheer terror and dawning realization in her eyes. She swayed slightly as if she might faint. I watched the scene unfold through a haze of pain and a strange sense of detached irony. The HOA Karen, the self-appointed guardian of neighborhood rules, had been so consumed by her own petty grievances that she had been completely oblivious to a life-or-death emergency involving her own spouse, and had actively hindered the efforts of the very person trying to save him. The paramedics loaded Mr. Henderson into the ambulance, his wife climbing in beside him, her tearful gaze meeting mine with profound gratitude. As the ambulance doors closed and the vehicle sped away, the silence left in its wake was thick with unspoken tension and Karen's palpable horror. Another contraction gripped me, this one so intense it brought me to my knees. The female paramedic rushed to my side, her professional demeanor instantly shifting to concern. "Ma'am, you need to sit down, now." I allowed her to guide me to a nearby lawn chair, my breath coming in ragged gasps. The reality of my own situation could no longer be ignored. My baby was coming, and soon. Karen stood frozen in the middle of the cul-de-sac, her face a mask of shock and dawning comprehension. Her eyes darted between the departing ambulance and me, her mind seemingly struggling to reconcile the image of the rude, demanding woman she had been moments ago with the stark reality of the life-saving emergency and my own precarious condition. The male paramedic approached Karen, his expression a mixture of professional concern and thinly veiled disapproval. "Ma'am, are you all right?" Karen didn't respond, her gaze still fixed on me. Finally, she whispered, her voice barely audible. That was, that was Harold. The paramedic nodded grimly. Yes, ma'am. We're taking him to the hospital now. Karen's carefully constructed world of neighborhood rules and personal entitlement seemed to shatter around her. The beige paint, the bird bath height, the improperly parked SUV, all the petty grievances that had consumed her attention now seemed utterly insignificant in the face of her husband's potential death and the selfless actions of the laboring paramedic she had so callously accosted. Another intense contraction ripped through me, a primal roar escaping my lips. The female paramedic helped me lie down on the lawn chair, her voice calm and reassuring. We need to get you to the hospital too. As the reality of my own impending delivery sank in, I looked up and saw Karen, still standing frozen in the cul-de-sac, her face a canvas of dawning horror and the crushing weight of her own self-absorption. The irony of the situation was almost unbearable. The HOA Karen had finally encountered a real emergency, one that directly impacted her own life, and the person she had tried to inconvenience was now the one who had provided the initial, crucial help, all while facing her own imminent, life-changing event. The immediate aftermath of Harold's medical emergency and my own escalating labor was a scene of controlled chaos. The remaining paramedic efficiently assessed my condition, his calm professionalism a stark contrast to Karen's frozen state of shock. He radioed for another ambulance, his voice urgent but reassuring. Within minutes, the familiar wail of sirens echoed through Willow Creek Estates once more. This time for me. As they carefully transferred me onto a stretcher, my focus drifted between the tightening bands of pain and the still figure of Karen standing in the cul-de-sac. Her face was a mask of utter devastation. The realization of her own callousness and the potential loss of her husband etched in every line. The oversized sunglasses no longer conveyed an air of entitlement, but rather seemed like a fragile shield against the harsh reality she was finally forced to confront. The journey to the hospital was a blur of contractions and the efficient, comforting presence of the paramedics. My own impending delivery had taken center stage, pushing the earlier absurdity of the parking dispute into the background, though the bitter irony of it all still lingered. Hours later, amidst the exhaustion and overwhelming joy of holding my newborn daughter, a nurse informed me that someone was asking to see me. Expecting a colleague or a friend, I was surprised when Karen Henderson hesitantly entered the room. She looked pale and drawn, the usual rigidness in her posture softened by a palpable vulnerability. The designer sunglasses were gone, revealing eyes red-rimmed and filled with a raw, unfamiliar emotion. Alex, she began, her voice barely a whisper. I don't know what to say. I cradled my sleeping daughter, the weight of her small body a comforting anchor. The anger I had felt earlier towards Karen had mellowed, replaced by a weary sort of pity. How's Harold? I asked, the question coming out more softly than I intended. Karen's eyes filled with tears. He's stable. They think it was a severe arrhythmia. They're running tests. A shudder ran through her. If you hadn't been there, if you hadn't started CPR, her voice broke. The unspoken words hung in the air. If I hadn't been there, despite being in labor, despite her rude demands to move my vehicle, the weight of her earlier actions and my subsequent help was a heavy burden for her to bear. I'm a paramedic, Karen, I said gently. It's what I do. Karen nodded slowly, her gaze fixed on my daughter. She's beautiful. A small, involuntary smile touched my lips. Thank you. A long silence stretched between us, filled only by the soft sounds of the hospital. Finally, Karen spoke again, her voice thick with emotion. I was so awful to you, so concerned with the parking, with the rules. I was completely blind to what was really happening. And you were in labor, helping my husband. The shame in her voice was palpable. I'm so sorry, Alex. So incredibly sorry. My priorities were so twisted. I looked at my daughter, her tiny hand curled against my chest. In that moment, holding this new life, I felt a strange sense of perspective. Karen's world of petty rules and self-importance had collided with the raw reality of life and death, and the impact had clearly shaken her to her core. It's okay, Karen, I said, though a part of me still felt a lingering resentment for her earlier callousness. What matters is that Harold is stable. Karen shook her head, tears silently tracing paths down her cheeks. No, it's not okay. I I almost cost Harold his life because of my ridiculous obsession with rules. And I was cruel to you when you were trying to help. She reached out a trembling hand, stopping just short of touching my daughter. Thank you, Alex. Thank you for everything. I I don't deserve your help. In the weeks that followed, Willow Creek Estates underwent a subtle but significant shift. The usual stream of complaints and nitpicking seemed to diminish. There was a newfound sense of community, a quiet acknowledgement of the fragility of life and the importance of looking beyond petty grievances. Karen was a changed woman. She became less vocal about minor infractions, more willing to offer help to her neighbors. She even spearheaded a neighborhood CPR certification drive, her newfound urgency driven by her own near tragedy. Our interactions remained somewhat formal, but there was a clear undercurrent of respect and a shared understanding of the extraordinary circumstances that had brought us together. She visited me again at home once I was settled with the baby, offering a quiet apology and a heartfelt congratulations. Willow Creek Estates didn't suddenly become a utopian community, but the events of that chaotic Saturday morning had undeniably left their mark. The focus shifted ever so slightly from perfectly manicured lawns and strictly enforced bylaws to the more important aspects of human connection and compassion. And at the heart of that shift was a HOA Karen who, faced with a life-altering crisis and the selfless actions of the woman she had so rudely dismissed, finally began to see the world and her neighbors with a newfound sense of perspective. The irony of it all remained, a quiet reminder of the day a laboring paramedic taught a HO Karen the true meaning of emergency and the insignificance of beige paint in the face of life itself.